this is where I want to share some things from Professor Jeffrey Lang's lecture. Fascinating lecture. I'm just blown away by the man. Really completely just mesmerized by this talk. He was raised in a difficult home. His mom was a wonderful lady. She was a nurse. She used to do extra hours at the hospital. Everybody loved her. Every time he went to pick her up from the hospital, the patients would sing her praises and say, "Your mother's a saint." And when she passed away, literally people kept coming at the funeral, telling him a story about the goodness of his mother. Just a really wonderful human being. Very source of great positive influence in his life for he and his brothers, right? And his father was an alcoholic. He was abusive. He used to beat him. He used to beat his wife on a regular basis. Curse, and he's never heard his mother curse, not once. And he used to beat him, beat the mother, and he was a very abusive man. And by the age of 16, he just couldn't figure this out. And he was raised, Catholic, and he's like raised in a faith, and his mom was a strong believer and everything. But he said, what kind of God lets this happen? What has she ever done to deserve this? What have I ever done to deserve this kind of beating all the time? And he kept praying to God to make his situation better. But did his situation get better? No. And you keep praying as a child and your prayers don't get answered, what's going to happen? Is there even anybody listening? It can't be a God. I mean, if there was, why would this be happening? So he lost his entire faith in humanity because he said, if there really was a God, why even make us? Why not just make us all good? Why let all this evil happen? Why people and then he said, his teens were spent in the 60s and the 70s, and so there are race riots, there are gang fights, some he was even a part of. And there's the impeachment of a president, the assassination of a president in front of this. The world is in chaos. And, Vietnam is going on and, napalm is being thrown and children are burning alive in Vietnam. What have they ever done to burn alive? And he's seeing all of this evil and it only reinforces in him, the world is far too corrupt, too evil, too obsessed with the shedding of blood and doing wrong to one another for this to be the product of a merciful, loving God. That just doesn't make any sense to me. He couldn't reconcile those two things. Many years later, he's 27, 28 years old, somebody gives him a copy of Quran as a present. Never reads it. One day he's sitting at home, and he's bored. He ran out of things to read, so he opens up the Quran and starts reading. From Fatiha. He's reading, he gets to Baqarah. And he's been to Catholic school. He's been to Sunday school. He understands the story the way I told you before. And he reads it and he goes, the author, because he doesn't know it's God, right? So he goes, the author must have got it wrong. What's he saying? I think the author missed the point. The point was we're sent here as a curse. But he starts off with Khalifa as an emissary, as someone to represent God's will, to do good on the earth. What? This is not a happy story. Why is this a happy story here? I don't get it. And he thought the author was confused. So he read the story in translation over again, and then over again. He says 20, 30 times, he kept reading the same story, and he kept finding things that kept messing with him. And he says, God says he's going to put this creature on the earth, and the angel said what? What the Quran says. What did the angel say? He's going to cause corruption and spill blood. And Professor Lang says, exactly! That's what I would have said. Why? Because that's what surrounded him, right? So he's looking at this and saying, wow, the angels are onto something in this book. The author is retelling the story. I guess he's got the same issues I do. Because the angels are asking, why did you even do this? Why would you do this? And, and they said, نَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. We declare your perfection. Look, why not just make us all angels? Why do you even have to make an earth? Heaven's already there. Just make more angels. If you really want to do something, this is working fine. Why do you have to make this messy creature who's going to... And then God comes around and says, I know what you don't. إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. I know what you don't know. He's like, what does God know that... I don't know. And he says, as I used to read this over and over, I used to actually start having conversations with the author, still being an atheist. What do you know that I don't know? Please tell me, because all my life I haven't known. I'd like to know. And then the Quran's answer, he taught Adam the names of all things. And then he presented them before the angels. I'm summarizing. We're going to go into depth later on. But I'm giving you the overview now, right? So he taught him the names of all things. And he presented Adam before the angels. And said, "Anbi'uni bi asma'iha." Tell me the names of these things and these people. They said, we can't. We have no knowledge of this. And then he asks Adam, "Anba'ahum bi asma'ihim." He threw the names out without a problem. Apparently, God said yes, human beings may be capable of corruption, bloodshed, but I'm going to give the human being something that you don't have, angels don't have. I'm going to teach him. Allama Adam. I'm going to teach him. And he's going to learn. And he's going to have knowledge. And this knowledge is going to liberate him. And he's going to be capable of amazing things because of this first thing that Allah is mentioning, which is what? Knowledge, his intellect, his inquiry, his ability to discover on this earth. And even by this point, the professor's like, we're just supposed to believe and not question. And you can't learn if you don't what? If you don't question, if you don't investigate. The human being is awesome because he's a learner? Really? And that's the secret? Allah knows what you don't, you don't know what the angels don't know, and that's part of that secret is his knowledge, the ability for the human being to learn with the pen, to pass knowledge down, to inquire, to investigate. And then he says, as he's reading even more, what he found fascinating was, what did Allah say to Adam alayhi salam? Here, live with your spouse in Jannah. Don't go near. Tilka shajara. Don't go near this tree. There's no fiery security guard standing next to the tree. There's no mention of the tree of good and evil that you shall. It's just a tree. Just a tree. And our mufassirun are baffled. ما كانت نوعية هذه الشجرة. What kind of tree was it? I wonder if it was pineapple or, If Allah wanted you to know, what would He have done? He would tell you. All He wanted to tell you is it's a tree. Good enough. Doesn't seem like a huge deal. Just look, it's a prohibition. It's a test. That's all. I just don't want you to go near this tree. That's it. Don't overthink it. And if you do, you'll be among those who do wrong. فَتَكُونَ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. And there's not, you're going to be the ones who do wrong if you do so. It's not, I'm going to burn you, you're going to suffer, you're going to be punished, I shall curse you. And there's nothing. He's like, this God is not angry. Why isn't He mad? He's reading this and he's like, why isn't His God, this God is supposed to put the fear of hell into to Adam to not go near this tree. But He's simply like, hey, there's a tree, can you stay away from that one? He seems pretty chill about the whole thing. And then when the angel, when the devil finally does whisper, he doesn't whisper to him, he whispers to both. And what does he say? أَزَلَّهُمَا. He caused them to slip. So the professor says, I couldn't believe it. The biggest mistake made in human history, for which we are cursed on this planet. And this book calls it a slip? A slip is, I accidentally wore your shoes out of the masjid. That's a slip. This is a slip? This is not a slip. This must be a bad translation. So he says, it's so cute. He says, I found my Arabian friends. And could you translate this word for word for me? And they're like, so, azallahuma shaitan caused them to what? What's azallah? What's that word? Slip. Who slip? Really? He couldn't handle it. Because this is such a big deal in the biblical account. And the Quran, all shaitan is able to do is make the human being what? Slip. And if you compare this to other sins, what sins were the angels worried about? Were the angels worried about, Adam's going to eat from a fruit, They're worried about the spilling of blood, the causing of corruption, mass murder, genocide, rape, all kinds of things happened on this earth. Compare them to the eating of a tree, eating of a fruit. It is, at the end of the day, from any measure of human intellect, it looks like a slip. It's a slip.